Because we are products of those school systems. They demand structure, do as you're told, jump through the hoops. And creativity is the casualty, often stillborn. Now, tolerance in the field of religion is a mixed blessing at best. I'm troubled by ecumenical gatherings where we have to dumb down our differences in order to get together and do anything. I can imagine a group of Christians, Jews, and Muslims getting together in Corvallis to, say, celebrate the 4th of July. And what would you have to do to sing together, to pray together, to stand together, to hold each other's hands together? Do we have to dumb things down in order to tolerate each other's presence? And if we do we do it ignoring the profound differences that separate these kinds of groups? Our religious differences are in fact so profound and so pervasive that encountering each other on almost any significant religious, political, social, or economic level must cause pain, which is ignored only at great risk. Tolerance, even in the pursuit of a worthy goal, must have its limitations, and I would not try to argue otherwise. Although it's interesting, in the last 2 years, we've heard an awful lot during the political conversations. We've heard about bipartisanship. As I've listened to these conversations, it seems to me that this notion of reaching across the aisle is something everybody wants to be identified with, and we almost take it for granted that this is a great thing to do. Everyone seems to understand that we need bipartisanship, tolerance on a local, federal, and international level. And the ingredients of bipartisanship are in this basket that I think describes the behaviors, generally speaking, we call tolerance. For instance, Vice President-elect Obama will have to deal with the nations of Iran and North Korea very shortly in a very real way. Well, we may believe with considerable justification that the behavior of these countries has been intolerable, and of course they believe, not without reason, that our actions have been intolerable. The President and his designated officials will have to display all the qualities outlined earlier under the umbrella of tolerance if we are to live with these people in relative safety for the foreseeable future. We have no alternative to that. None at all. Looking at tolerance through the lenses of the real world suggests to me that we fail to practice tolerance at our peril. And now for just a personal note, my own experience with this stuff. The cloak of tolerance is deceptive because it may disguise a body of intolerance. In the fall of 1959, I was the pastor of this congregational church in a suburb of Minneapolis. We had race relations Sundays in those days. It was kind of a new thing in the 50s, and our denomination promoted it. But instead of my just standing up in the pulpit and talking about how wonderful it was to have race relations and nice and how much I loved everybody of every race, etc., I decided that was we could do more with that. So I discovered that there was a big Baptist black church on the north side of Minneapolis. And I called the minister to see if he would be willing to exchange pulpits with me on that Race Relations Sunday. And he quickly agreed, and we did. And I had an absolutely fabulous time. I'd never been to a black church, dominantly black church, and the preaching one was marvelous. The people were so much more animated than you people are tonight. And incidentally, we're talking about diversity, Pastor Martin was, and I look around, and you know what? You talk about homogeneity. I mean, I see old and young, but I don't see any black people here.
One right there.
Where are you? I hope you don't feel like I'm token black. Shame. Think about that, Socratic Club. Think about that. Anyway. I had a wonderful time. And on Monday morning, I could hardly wait to get to the phone so I could call the minister of the church and tell him what a great time I had had. But in the course of the conversation, I shared with him the question, Jim, I said, for that was his name, tell me why your people seem so formal. They address each other with Mr. or Mrs., and I never heard anyone refer to you by your first name. Everyone at my church calls me Tom, or something else. And there was a long silence. Finally, he responded in measured terms. Oh, that's a carryover from our slavery days and living with the attitudes of racial discrimination. My people know there was a time not long ago when none of them was called Mr. or Mrs., only by their first names. And a male was more likely to be called boy, whether he's 7 or 70. Many of my people still experience these reactions from white people. Therefore, we never refer to each other by our first names, sometimes not even in the privacy of our home. Some wives of clergy even refer to their husbands in the bedroom as reverend. I fell into a deep silence, and the tears welled up in my eyes. And I choked out the words, when I was in your church, did I by any chance call you by your first name? Yes, he said. I said, how did you know? Oh, he said, I've already had a call this morning. One of my dear, lovely little old ladies called me, and she said, Reverend, I love that white man, and I want you to invite him back. But I have to tell you this. I can't stand to hear him call you by your first name. Intolerance? I don't know. Ignorance? I don't know. Insensitivity? Pain? Boy, yeah. I spent a lot of time with homosexuals. Counselors, friends. And when they tell me that people have said to them, I love you, but I hate your sin. Tolerance, cloaking a body of intolerance. Pain, to be sure. One of my favorite plays is St. Joan by George Bernard Shaw. Joan has been burned at the stake, having suffered the consequences of, you could say, religious persecution of truth. And she's now dead. But Shaw adds an epilogue in which it is now St. Joan. She's been canonized by the church, and she's now in the company of all those who were involved in getting her burned. Each one trying to justify why they would canonize her, but could not practice the behavior for which she is sainted.